I never imagined that walking off a delayed flight would end with my own family treating me like I needed permission to keep something that was never theirs in the first place. When I pulled my suitcase toward the front porch, I noticed the driveway before I noticed the people. The spot where my company Mercedes always sat was empty, no tire marks, no broken glass. Just a clean stretch of concrete that looked strangely unfamiliar. For a second, I wondered if I'd parked somewhere else before leaving for my work trip. Then I heard my mother-in-law's voice. "There you are." She was standing on the porch with the calm confidence of someone waiting for praise instead of questions. She smiled warmly. "We've already taken care of everything," I frowned. "What do you mean?" She walked down the steps as if she were delivering wonderful news. "The family had a meeting yesterday." She folded her hands together proudly. "We all agreed Sarah needs the car more than you." I stared at her. "I'm sorry, what car?" She looked genuinely confused. "The Mercedes. The vote was unanimous. It's hers now." For several seconds I honestly thought she was joking. Nobody gives away someone else's vehicle because of a family discussion. Especially not one worth tens of thousands of dollars. I laughed once. A short, confused laugh. Then I looked back at the empty driveway. She wasn't joking. Before I could answer, the front door opened. My husband stepped outside. Marcus. Normally he could read my face before I even spoke. Normally he knew exactly when I was stressed after traveling. This time, he wouldn't even look directly at me. His eyes stayed fixed somewhere near the ground. That silence told me everything he already knew. Behind him came Sarah. She twirled a key ring around one finger with a smile so proud it almost looked rehearsed. The keychain hanging from it caught my attention immediately. I'd bought it months ago during a conference in Seattle. It was still attached to my keys. "My new car looks amazing," she said proudly. "You barely drive it anyway. It spends most of its time sitting here." I felt something tighten inside my chest. Not anger, not yet, disbelief. I looked at Marcus. "You knew about this?" He rubbed the back of his neck. We talked. "I didn't think it would become such a big deal." "A big deal?" Someone had taken the vehicle assigned to me through work. This wasn't an old family sedan. It wasn't a weekend toy. It wasn't even legally mine to give away. But nobody standing there seemed interested in that detail. My mother-in-law smiled again. "In this family, we always help whoever needs it most." Sarah crossed her arms. "I've got a child. You travel constantly. It just makes sense." There it was. The decision had already been made. Without me. About something connected directly to my career. I looked around the porch. Everyone appeared strangely comfortable, almost relieved, like they'd solved a problem. Meanwhile, I was still trying to understand how they'd convinced themselves this was normal. Then an uncomfortable realization hit me. This wasn't spontaneous. They'd discussed it, debated it, voted on it. Nobody, not even my husband, had thought to call me. I picked up my suitcase again. "I need to know exactly what happened." Nobody answered immediately. Instead, my mother-in-law gently touched my arm. "Come inside. We'll explain over dinner." 6 years earlier, I would have accepted that invitation without hesitation. I'd spent most of my marriage believing peace was worth almost any compromise. Whenever disagreements happened, I became the one who apologized first. When holidays became stressful, I smoothed everything over. When money became awkward, I quietly helped. When someone needed support, I volunteered before anyone asked. I convinced myself that being the calm one made me strong. Only later would I realize something painful. Every time I ignored my own boundaries, everyone else learned they didn't have to respect them either. Inside the house, everything felt strangely normal. Dinner was already cooking. Music played softly in the background. My suitcase sat beside the kitchen table while everyone chatted about ordinary things. Nobody seemed concerned that my vehicle had disappeared. Eventually, my mother-in-law cleared her throat. "You shouldn't think of this as losing something. You should think of it as helping family." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. We're sharing, interesting word. Sharing usually involves permission. Nobody had asked mine." Marcus finally spoke. "We'll figure everything out. I promise." I looked directly at him. "Where is the car?" "It's parked here." Sarah answered before he could. "I'm taking Ivy to school with it tomorrow." That sentence landed differently than anything else she'd said. Tomorrow. Meaning this wasn't symbolic. She intended to keep driving it, regularly, as if ownership had somehow changed because several relatives voted. I excused myself for a moment. Not because I was overwhelmed, because I needed facts before emotions. I stepped into the hallway and checked my phone. Several unread work emails waited. Normally I'd ignore them until Monday. Tonight I opened one absent-mindedly. The subject line immediately caught my attention. Fleet compliance reminder. I opened it. Halfway through the first paragraph, my heartbeat slowed. Not from relief, from clarity. The message reminded every employee assigned a company vehicle that Monday morning's quarterly audit required each vehicle to be physically verified at its registered location. Any missing vehicle would immediately trigger a compliance investigation. I read one sentence twice, then a third time. The employee assigned to the vehicle remains fully responsible for its location and possession at all times. I closed my eyes. This wasn't a family disagreement anymore. It wasn't about fairness. It wasn't about generosity. It was about my career. If that Mercedes wasn't back where company records expected it to be, the investigation wouldn't begin with Sarah, or Marcus, or my mother-in-law. It would begin with me, and suddenly, keeping the peace became the most dangerous decision I could possibly make. I stood in the hallway for almost a full minute, staring at my phone while the sounds of laughter drifted in from the dining room. It amazed me how two completely different realities could exist inside the same house. One room believed they had just solved a family problem. The other held a woman realizing her entire career could disappear before breakfast on Monday. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and returned to the table. Nobody noticed the change in my expression. Or maybe they did and assumed I had finally accepted their decision. My mother-in-law smiled as she passed another serving dish around the table. I knew you'd understand once you had time to think. I looked at her calmly. No, I said. I understand something now. What? That this isn't a family decision. It's a legal problem. The room became noticeably quieter. Sarah rolled her eyes. Everything doesn't have to become so dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being accurate. I turned toward Marcus. You told them this car belonged to the company. Didn't you? His hesitation answered before his words did. I probably didn't explain it very well. You didn't explain it? He sighed. It just seemed easier. Easier for who? For everyone. Those 3 words hit harder than I expected. For everyone. Except me. Over the years, Marcus had developed a habit of making uncomfortable truths disappear. If his mother misunderstood something, he stayed quiet. If Sarah assumed something, he stayed quiet. If correcting someone risked an argument, he stayed quiet. I'd mistaken that silence for kindness. Now I saw it for what it really was: avoidance. The conversation moved on as though nothing important had been said. My mother-in-law continued setting plates on the table. Sarah talked excitedly about taking the Mercedes shopping later that week. Even little Ivy asked if they could drive it to school every day. Every sentence made the situation worse, not because of what they were saying, because they genuinely believed it. Nobody was pretending. Nobody thought they were stealing anything. Marcus had spent years allowing one misunderstanding after another until everyone honestly believed my company vehicle was simply an expensive family asset. That realization frightened me more than anger ever could. People who know they're wrong sometimes back down. People convinced they're right rarely do. Dinner continued almost normally. I barely touched my food. Instead, I watched everyone around the table. Something I'd ignored for years suddenly became impossible to miss. Every decision in this family flowed through one person, my mother-in-law. Nobody challenged her. Nobody questioned her conclusions, not because she shouted. She almost never did. She simply spoke with absolute certainty. Over time, everyone stopped thinking independently, including Marcus, especially Marcus. After dinner, Sarah tossed the Mercedes keys into the air and caught them with a grin. I can't wait until tomorrow. I looked directly at her. I need those keys, she laughed. No, I wasn't asking. She crossed her arms. And I'm not giving them back. Marcus finally stood. Come on. Let's all calm down. There it was again. Calm down. His favorite solution. Never solve the problem, just reduce the volume. I looked at him quietly. Marcus, my job depends on that vehicle. I know. No, you don't. If you understood, you'd already have those keys in your hand. He looked trapped. Not between right and wrong. Between me and disappointing his mother. He lowered his eyes again. Can we please talk about this tomorrow? Tomorrow? Everything in our marriage happened tomorrow. Boundaries, conversations, promises, accountability. Always tomorrow. I suddenly realized tomorrow had become another word for never. I picked up my bag. I'm leaving. My mother-in-law frowned. So soon? Yes. We haven't finished discussing this. I have. Sarah shook her head. You're making such a huge issue over a car. I stopped walking, then slowly turned around. It isn't about the car. Then what is it? It's about everyone in this house believing they had the authority to decide what happens to something connected to my name. Silence. Not uncomfortable silence. Confused silence. They still didn't understand. I walked outside into the cool evening air. For the first time all weekend, being alone felt safer than being surrounded by family. The drive home took barely 20 minutes. I don't remember most of it. My mind replayed dozens of conversations from the last 6 years. Little moments I'd dismissed. Comments I'd laughed off. Times Marcus had asked me to just let it go. Every memory suddenly fit together. This wasn't the first boundary they'd crossed. It was simply the biggest one. At home, I went straight to my office. The employment folder sat exactly where I always kept it. Inside was every document connected to my position. Performance reviews, contracts, fleet paperwork, travel policies. I found the vehicle assignment agreement and started reading carefully. Every paragraph removed another excuse. Every signature reminded me of one fact. I wasn't protecting a possession. I was protecting my professional responsibility. Then I reached the section I'd never paid much attention to years earlier. Employee accepts full responsibility for the assigned vehicle and any unauthorized transfer of possession. I leaned back slowly. There it was, in plain English. Exactly what I'd feared. No family vote. No misunderstanding. No emotional explanation would matter. If something happened to that Mercedes, the responsibility stopped with me. Not my husband, not my mother-in-law. Me. I checked the time, Sunday evening. Less than 24 hours remained before the compliance audit. I opened my laptop and logged into the company fleet portal. A map loaded onto the screen. Every assigned vehicle carried GPS tracking. Of course it did. I'd always known that. I just hadn't thought about it until now. The blue location marker wasn't sitting outside my house. It was still parked outside my mother-in-law's home, exactly where Sarah planned to leave it overnight. A deep feeling settled over me. Not panic, resolution. For 2 days I'd been trying to solve this like a family disagreement. It wasn't, it was now a compliance issue, which meant emotions no longer mattered. Facts did. I reached for my phone, then stopped. One final conversation, that was all I would offer. One opportunity for everyone to correct the mistake voluntarily. After that, the decision would leave the family entirely. I dialed Marcus. He answered almost immediately. "Hey, we can fix this. I know, good. Then bring the car home tonight." Silence. Finally he spoke. "Mom thinks you're overreacting. I didn't ask what your mother thinks." Another silence. Longer this time. "I don't think Sarah's ready to give it back." That sentence told me everything. Not can't. Not shouldn't. Not doesn't understand. Ready. As though ownership depended on emotions instead of law. I closed my eyes. "Marcus, listen carefully. If that car isn't back before tomorrow morning, I won't have another choice." He sounded frustrated. Why does everything have to become so extreme? Because nobody listened when I was reasonable. But I didn't say that. Instead, I answered quietly. "I'm asking you one last time, bring it home." He exhaled slowly. "I'll see what I can do." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because I'd heard that sentence for 6 years. "I'll see what I can do." Translation, nothing will change. I ended the call, set my phone on the desk, and finally admitted something I'd avoided throughout my entire marriage. The hardest conversation I needed wasn't with Marcus, or Sarah, or my mother-in-law. It was with myself, because the real question wasn't whether they respected my boundaries, it was whether I was finally willing to enforce them. I looked once more at the GPS location on my laptop. The blue marker hadn't moved. Neither had the truth. For 6 years I'd believed keeping everyone happy made me a good wife. Tonight I understood something completely different. Peace without respect isn't peace, it's surrender. And Monday morning, I was done surrendering. Monday arrived far sooner than I wanted. The alarm rang at 5:45. I'd barely slept. Not because I was afraid, because my mind had finally stopped making excuses. Sometimes clarity keeps you awake longer than anxiety ever could. The first thing I did wasn't check my phone. It wasn't make coffee, it was walk to the window. The driveway was empty, exactly where my company expected that Mercedes to be. There was nothing. I stood there for several seconds before taking a slow breath. The decision had already been made. Now all that remained was acting on it. I picked up my phone and called Fleet Compliance. A calm voice answered almost immediately. "This is Fleet Operations. My name is Thea Carter," I said. I need to report unauthorized possession of my assigned company vehicle. There was no emotion on the other end, only professionalism. Can you confirm whether the vehicle has been stolen? I paused. That word carried weight. No, it wasn't stolen by a stranger. It was taken by family members without my authorization. The representative typed for a few seconds. I understand. Would you like us to initiate vehicle recovery? I closed my eyes. 24 hours earlier, that question would have shattered me. Now, it simply sounded necessary. Yes, please begin recovery. The woman explained the next steps carefully. A contracted recovery operator would retrieve the vehicle. The GPS location had already confirmed where it was parked. Because company property was involved, a local incident report would also be attached to protect my employment record. It sounded cold, clinical, almost mechanical, yet somehow it felt fair, unlike everything that had happened inside that family. After ending the call, I sat quietly with my coffee. No tears, no panic, only an unfamiliar feeling, relief, not because I enjoyed conflict, because for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying everyone else's choices on my shoulders. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Then again, and again, 6 missed calls. 3 messages, please don't do this. Mom's freaking out, call me before it's too late. I read every word, then locked my phone. For 6 years, his emergencies had always become mine. His discomfort had always outranked my boundaries. Today, nothing changed, except me. Around 7:30 I drove toward his mother's house. The streets were unusually quiet. School buses had already passed. People watered their lawns, walked their dogs. Started another ordinary Monday. Nobody knew an entire marriage was about to reach its final chapter. When I turned onto the street, I immediately noticed movement in the driveway. Sarah was cleaning the Mercedes with a microfiber towel. She smiled proudly every few seconds as sunlight reflected across the hood. She still believed she'd won. My mother-in-law carried 2 mugs of coffee onto the porch. Marcus stood nearby looking exhausted. He spotted my rental first. His shoulders dropped. He already knew. I parked across the street. Not because I was hiding, because I wanted one moment to breathe before walking into whatever happened next. The recovery truck was still several minutes away according to fleet operations. I crossed the road. Nobody spoke first. Finally, my mother-in-law smiled. I knew you'd come around. We'll work everything out. I shook my head. No, I came to tell you something. Her smile faded slightly. What? The company has already started recovering the vehicle, Sarah laughed. No, they haven't. They can't. It's basically yours. It was never mine. It was assigned to me. There's a difference. She waved dismissively. That's just paperwork. No, it's ownership. Marcus finally stepped forward. Thea, please, can we talk privately? I looked at him. There isn't anything private left. Everything that should have stayed between husband and wife had already become a family meeting. Why start protecting privacy now? He lowered his voice anyway. If they take the car, my mother will never forgive this, I answered quietly. This isn't happening because of your mother, it's happening because of choices. He looked genuinely confused. Whose? I held his eyes. Everyone's, especially yours. Before he could answer, a low diesel engine echoed from the end of the street. Every head turned. The flatbed truck appeared slowly around the corner. Amber warning lights rotated silently across nearby houses. Nobody moved. The truck stopped beside the curb. The driver climbed out carrying a clipboard. Professional, calm, completely unaffected by family emotions. He walked directly toward me. Ims Carter? Yes, I'm here regarding fleet vehicle 40827. I'll need you to verify your identity. I handed him my driver's license. He compared it with his paperwork, then nodded. Everything matches. He turned toward the Mercedes. Sarah stepped between them. You can't take this. That's my car. The operator remained polite. Ma'am, the registered owner listed here is Halstead Medical Systems. He held up the paperwork. The vehicle is being recovered under company authorization. She looked at my mother-in-law. Tell him. My mother-in-law walked forward confidently. There must be some misunderstanding. This vehicle belongs to our family. The operator glanced at the documents again. No, ma'am, it doesn't. Simple. Calm. Final. For the first time all weekend, nobody could argue louder than paperwork. My mother-in-law looked toward Marcus. Say something. He opened his mouth, closed it again. The silence lasted only a few seconds. But somehow, it summarized 6 years of marriage better than any argument ever could. He wasn't choosing. He was avoiding choosing, exactly as he'd always done. And for the first time, everyone else noticed it too. No one spoke for several long seconds. The recovery operator simply waited. He had probably seen situations like this before, people arguing over ownership, families insisting something belonged to them. But paperwork doesn't care about emotions. Facts don't change because more people believe a different story. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "This is ridiculous," she pointed directly at me. "You're doing this out of spite." I looked at her calmly. "If I wanted revenge, I would have embarrassed you on social media yesterday. I'm here because I want to keep my job." She laughed bitterly. "You care more about your company than your family, for years." That sentence would have crushed me. Today, it barely landed. "No," I replied. "I care about people who respect me." A heavy silence settled over the driveway. Even my mother-in-law had no immediate answer. The tow operator attached the first cable to the front suspension. Metal clicked against metal. The sound echoed through the quiet neighborhood. It wasn't loud, but somehow it felt like the sound of 6 years finally coming apart. Marcus walked toward me slowly. His face looked exhausted, not angry, just defeated. "Thea, I messed up." Those 4 words were something I'd waited years to hear, but they arrived too late. I should have told them the truth. I should have stopped this before it started. "You shouldn't have had to fight everyone alone." I looked into his eyes. For the first time, I believed he meant every word. That was the tragedy. Sometimes people become honest only after the damage is already done. "I know," I answered quietly. "I believe you." His expression changed slightly, hope. Just a little, until I continued. "But believing you doesn't change what happened." He lowered his head. "I know." Another silence. This one different. Not uncomfortable, final. The flatbed's hydraulic winch began pulling the Mercedes forward. Slowly, the car climbed onto the truck. Nobody tried to stop it anymore. Sarah watched with tears running down her face. My mother-in-law stared at the ground. Marcus stood completely still. For years he had tried to avoid conflict. Today, his silence solved nothing. It only left him watching the consequences arrive exactly as they'd been warned. The operator secured the final straps, signed one last document, then handed me a copy. "Vehicle recovery complete." I thanked him, nothing more. He climbed back into the truck. Moments later, the Mercedes disappeared around the corner. And with it, so did the last illusion that this family could keep pretending everything was normal. No one moved. Finally, my mother-in-law looked at me. Her confidence was gone. Only disappointment remained. "You destroyed this family." I thought about that sentence carefully, then answered honestly. "No, I stopped letting it destroy me." She frowned. "That's selfish." "No, it's called a boundary." She shook her head slowly. "You've changed." I smiled for the first time all weekend. "Exactly." Without another word, I turned toward my rental. Behind me I heard Marcus call my name. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry." Real apologies are strange. They're usually short, no excuses, no explanations, no blame, just ownership. I appreciated hearing it, more than he probably realized, but appreciation isn't the same as reconciliation. "I hope you become the man you apologize for not being," I said softly. Then I got into my car and drove away. A month later, I moved into a small townhouse across the city. It wasn't as large as the home Marcus and I had shared, but every room felt peaceful. Not because it was quiet, because nothing inside required me to shrink myself. At work, the compliance audit closed without issue. My manager thanked me for reporting the situation immediately. Something I had feared would end my career actually strengthened my professional reputation. Integrity mattered, more than avoiding uncomfortable conversations. 3 months later, the divorce papers were finalized. Marcus never argued, never delayed the process. He signed everything respectfully. Sometimes, accepting responsibility means knowing you've already lost. One Saturday afternoon, I bought another car, nothing extravagant, no luxury badge, no unnecessary features. Just a reliable sedan that fit my life perfectly. When the dealership handed me the title, I stared at my name for several seconds. Only one name, mine. No votes, no family discussions, no permission, just ownership. Real ownership. As I drove home, I realized something surprising. The most valuable thing I gained wasn't the new car, it wasn't the house, it wasn't even my independence. It was trust, trust in myself. For years, whenever conflict appeared, I questioned my own instincts first. Maybe I'm overreacting, maybe I should let it go, maybe keeping everyone happy matters more. Now, those questions were gone. About 6 months later, my phone buzzed unexpectedly, a message from Marcus. "Mom asks about you sometimes. She'll probably never admit it, but I think she finally understands what happened." I read the message twice, then smiled gently. Understanding wasn't something I needed anymore. Accountability had been enough. I wished him well and left the conversation there. Some stories don't need another chapter, they simply need an ending. People often think boundaries create distance. That's only half true. Healthy boundaries don't push good people away. They reveal who was only close because you never said no. For years, I believed love meant sacrifice without limits. Now I understand something completely different. Love without respect eventually becomes obligation, and obligation slowly becomes resentment. The hardest lesson of my life wasn't learning how to stand up for myself. It was realizing that the people who truly love you never ask you to disappear so they can feel comfortable. That Monday morning didn't just save my career. It gave me back something I'd been giving away little by little for years. My own voice. And once I finally heard it, I promised myself no family vote would ever silence it again.